Good evening, everyone. And welcome once again to Bhagavad-gita Satsang, our online yoga philosophy class. My name is Hari-kirtana, and it is a pleasure for me to be here with you, an honor to have you here with me. Thank you very much for choosing to spend a little bit of your time with me. And if you can hear my expressions of gratitude, those of you who are here in real time, if you would be kind enough to raise your hand with a little raise your hand tool, thank you very much for letting me know I can be heard. It's very nice to see all of you who are in the participant zone. Tess, thank you for being here. Sue, Susan, very nice to see you here live. Jessica, Alistair, Jessica, and Shana, thank you. I assume that a few others will be joining us, as is their weekly habit. So I look forward to welcoming them into the satsang as well. So let's take care of our usual housekeeping. Right. You can adjust your audio settings and your viewing options in the upper right-hand corner. No mic or video camera on your end is necessary, nor do you have to worry about such things because you can see and hear me, but I cannot see or hear you. But if you would like to be heard or make your presence known in some form or fashion, please type into the Q&A box and let me know what it is you have to say or what you would like to ask about. And that takes care of our housekeeping. Last week, the Yoga of Royal Secrets, Chapter 9, continued with verses 20 through 25. We spoke about the results of worshiping demigods and how, according to Krishna, there are many paths and many destinations. We'll review a little bit of that this evening and how that is a little different from the conventional wisdom of many paths, one destination. This evening, we will talk about the simplicity of devotion, how Krishna makes it easy for us to engage in bhakti yoga, and how Krishna sees those who are engaged in the process of bhakti yoga, both making the attempt in terms of practice and those who have perfected their practice. So we'll cover verses 26 through 31. But first, we will chant our invocation mantra. For those of you who are new to Sanskrit diacritical marks in transliterated Sanskrit, the dot over the M also sometimes appears under the M, but either way, the same effect is there. We close the back of our tongues to the soft palate in the back of the roof of our mouths, at the same time that we bring our lips together out front. The bar across the vowels, in this case A's, indicates a long open sound as opposed to a short sound, which I trust you will notice as we chant, call and response style. I will chant, you chant back. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. All right. Well, Jessica, you can keep chanting it all week. Very nice to know. Last week, we closed out with this verse, number 25, worshippers of demigods go to the demigods. Those who are devoted to ancestors will go to such ancestors. And those whose sacrifice is offered to ghosts will go to those ghosts, but my devotees will surely come to me. So here is where Krishna is making this distinction. Different paths lead to different destinations. The train to Chicago does not go to St. Louis. We spoke a little bit about how demigod worship per se is not a thing in Western civilization. We tend to associate demigods with mythology, whereas in Orthodox Hinduism, demigods are considered to be real people, aliens living in other dimensions of the universe, who are especially empowered to deal with cosmic administrative responsibilities, but also who, by virtue of very good karma, have a very long duration of life and an opportunity to enjoy their senses to an extraordinary degree by comparison to what's available to us here. But Krishna doesn't really think all that much of that as an aspiration, having previously qualified the entire material world as a place of sorrow on account of constantly going, coming back, going, coming back. You use up your good karma, you run the table on your good karma, and then you have to come back and start over to build your account up again. Kind of a back and forth repetition that Krishna says is really not ultimately satisfactory. So here's the verse in Sanskrit, and I wanted to bring your attention to the last line. So for those of you who are just listening, the last line is Yanti mad yajino pimam. And mud and yajino are the two words that I would like to bring everyone's attention to. So mad yajino, I have translated as my devotees. Mud, my. Yajino means actually that those who offer sacrifice to me, that is to say, those who approach me through sacrifice. So here in this section, Krishna is speaking about various kinds of sacrifice to make offerings to different personalities. And this harkens back to earlier chapters on karma yoga, when Krishna described sacrifice, and specifically sacrifice to administrative demigods, as a way of turning the wheel that makes cosmic order happen, expressing gratitude for the gifts of nature by offering the gifts of nature back to the source of those gifts. Krishna, however, also says that he himself is the ultimate source of such gifts, and therefore offerings directly to him immediately satisfy all of the demigods that are acting as his agents in the administration of cosmic order. So madhyajino, offering sacrifice to me, offering worship to me, in some form, in some action. So it's not just a matter of feelings of devotion. What we're talking about here are actions of devotion, of expressions of devotion through action. Hence, madhyajino, offering sacrifice to me, doing something, as opposed to having feelings about me that are not acted upon. So that's where we left off. This idea that one who directs one's devotional activity to Krishna goes to Krishna, as opposed to all the other possible places that you can go. The difference, of course, being that going to Krishna is a situation where one does not have to come back. It's beyond karma. Therefore, it's not a matter of accruing good karma. You get to Krishna for a while and then you come back and you have to do it again. going to Krishna is stepping outside the box of the material world, whereas going to demigods, ghosts, ancestors, etc., is all taking place within the arena of the material world. All right, so this week, we're going to move from this verse into 26 through 31. And if you have any questions about what I just covered, just reviewing what we looked at last week, go ahead and pop that into the Q&A box, and I will keep my eye on that for any questions that you have. And while I anxiously wait for your questions, I am going to read through the verses that we're covering this evening. Then we will go back and look at each verse in detail. So, beginning with verse 26. Now, verse 26 is the verse we're going to chant this evening. We're going to chant the Sanskrit for this verse. This is a well-known verse amongst those who are familiar with the Bhagavad-gita. It's actually something we're going to spend some additional time with today. So here we go. Verse 26 from the 9th chapter. Krishna continues to speak. I will accept a leaf, a flower, fruit, or water as an offering of devotion from whoever presents them to me in a mood of pure devotion. Text 27 and 28 together. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you sacrifice, whatever gifts you give, whatever austerities you perform, do them as an offering to me, for by doing so, you will be freed from the bondage of actions' reactions, both good and bad. By linking yourself to me through this principle of renunciation, you shall attain liberation and come to me. Verse 29. I am equally disposed toward all living beings. I hate no one, nor do I favor anyone. Even so, I hold those who honor me with offerings of love within me. Indeed, I am within them as well. Text 30. If one offers their love to me without deviation, then, even if they have engaged in dreadful behavior, they are to be considered saintly, for such a person shall be rightly absolved. Text 31. Such a person quickly becomes righteous and attains lasting peace. Know for certain, O son of Kunti, Arjuna, that one who offers their love to me is never lost. Okay. I got a chance to do something I don't usually do. In fact, I can't remember the last time I did this. Over the last few days, I was the recipient of what amounted to permission slips signed by parents. Meaning I was dealing with minors, high school students, as a matter of fact, at least old enough for me to relate to on a reasonably adult level. Although when I looked at them, I thought, I don't remember being that young when I was that young. But I guess I was. Anyway, they were a great group of high school students that were brought to me by one of my longstanding students from my yoga classes at a studio I used to teach at. And it was part of a mini-mester, is what they called it. Just 3 days of doing yoga and meditation. And I was lucky enough to spend some time with them, introducing them to yoga philosophy, different kinds of physical yoga practices, a little bit of pranayama, and meditation. It was fun. The demographics of contemporary yoga were in play. There were 3 guys and about a dozen ladies. And it was kind of meaningful to me insofar as that's about the age I was when I first really got interested in doing yoga, as opposed to just attracted to the idea of yoga. I always liked the idea of yoga as soon as I saw it when I was a little kid, but I didn't really have a teacher. I didn't have yoga around me. But once I got to the age where I started reading books of spiritual philosophy, then I started picking up on yoga as a practice. And the very first thing that I realized I could do as a yoga practice was to become a vegetarian. The books that I was reading were pretty clear that leading a non-violent lifestyle was an essential part of a yogic lifestyle. And the idea just seemed attractive to me and logical to me. And so I was 16 and I told my mother that henceforth I was going to be a vegetarian. And her reply was, "You'll eat what I cook or you won't eat." And I said, "Okay, deal." I think I've told you this story before. You know, she was testing me to see if I was serious, and that was reasonable. I accepted that. What else could I do? I wasn't going to cook for myself because not only didn't I know how, but she wasn't going to let me in her kitchen. That's just how things were in my house. Anyway, after a few days, she saw that A, I was serious because I was living on cereal, and B, she had time to figure out how to accommodate me, and that's how it was henceforth and since then. So I welcomed the opportunity to introduce yoga to a group of people who were just about the age that I started doing yoga. But I didn't bring this particular item of yoga philosophy up. I alluded to it when I mentioned that there were 8 limbs of yoga, and the first limb consisted of 5 ethical imperatives that guided moral decision-making. So yoga could be thought of as a moral philosophy, and the first and foremost of those ethical imperatives was to live in such a way as to not harm any other being. And I left it at that. And the relevance of this particular story that I'm telling you is that in this verse that we're going to take a close look at, Krishna will now describe a very simple way that one can engage in bhakti yoga, or specifically devotional service to him. Here he's saying that those who engage in sacrifice, who make offerings to this person, that person, the other kind of person, they go to these various places, but one who offers something to me, they're going to come to me. Now he's going to tell us how you do it. And that brings us to the verse that we are going to chant. So here we go. Here, I hope we go. There we go. Diacritical marks. The dot over the M I've already explained, and we have quite a few of those. A dot under an S indicates an regular SH sound, the same way you'd always make one. The C is always a CH sound, and if you see two C's together, you pronounce them both. A C with an H after it is also a CH sound, but with a little extra air after the C. A Y at the end of a word will merge into the next word. So rather than being an E sound, it'll be a Y sound that goes into the first letter of the word that follows it. A dash or an accent mark over an S indicates an SH sound that is pronounced farther back in one's mouth than the regular SH sound. So it comes out sounding a little lower, kind of like a low-pitched white noise, as opposed to high-pitched white noise, shh. And finally, the dot under an H at the end of a word at the end of a line means that the vowel that precedes the H will be echoed back in its short form, irrespective of whether the vowel is long or short. So here we go. I chant one line, you chant the line back. Patram pushpam phalam toyam yo me bhaktya prayashchati tad aham bhaktyupahritam ashnami prayatatmanaha. The R in the word upahritam got away from my list of explanations. A dot under an R indicates just a short trill on an R. So it's a R sound with your tongue flicking up to the roof of your mouth, as opposed to an R sound with your teeth coming out in front of your lower lip. Be that as it may, I trust you all chanted very nicely, and now we'll look again at the translation. I will accept a leaf, a flower, fruit, or water as an offering of devotion from whoever presents them to me in a mood of pure devotion. All right, so let's sink into this just a little bit. So there are two things to consider in this very important verse. It's so important, as a matter of fact, that in another literature of Krishna's biography, the Srimad Bhagavatam, the books directly behind me, he will repeat this same verse almost verbatim in speaking to his childhood friend, Sudama, who, as an adult, comes to visit him after many years. So the first thing is that there's a list: a leaf, a flower, fruit, or water. So that's the list. Then the second thing is the most important ingredient in the offering, which is a mood of devotion. If you are devoted to someone, then you do things for them. There's an element of sacrifice that you will make for the pleasure of this person whom you love, or with whom you are cultivating a relationship of love. So here Krishna is saying, well, these are things that I'll accept. I like these things. Therefore, those are the things we should offer if we are interested in cultivating a relationship of love with Krishna. What's interesting here is that there's no violence involved in procuring any of these things. Taking a leaf from a tree or a plant does not kill the plant. Taking a flower from the plant does not kill the plant. Offering fruit that you pick from a vine or from a tree also does not kill the plant. And water. Well, you can't kill the river by taking some water. So, nuts, bananas, tomatoes, peppers, blueberries, grains. Now, the ideal of absolute nonviolence is not possible. I know because I've got a garden. And inevitably, there's going to be collateral damage that, even if a plant lives its whole natural lifespan while it very generously supplies you with food, keeping the bugs away, digging through the dirt, pulling weeds. I mean, weeds are people too. But you can't let your garden get full of weeds and expect your plants that are supplying you with food to be healthy. You have to protect them. You have to defend them. So some violence is required insofar as pulling weeds goes, at the very, very least. So how does one deal with the karmic reaction for visiting violence upon other living beings in the form of weeds or bugs or what have you, for the sake of growing what would otherwise be entirely non-violent sources of food? Well, that's where the offering with devotion comes in. And we'll see in a verse coming up how this applies. The main thing here is that this is an act of devotion. It's not just devotional sentiment. It's not just feeling devotion. It's expressing that feeling through action. And that's the other big takeaway. What Krishna is encouraging us to do is engage in a relationship with him. And you can only have a relationship with a person. You can't have a relationship with an inanimate object, or at least you can, but it's a one-way street. There won't be reciprocation. An active relationship, and particularly a relationship of love, means that there's a lover, a beloved, and love itself. So you need three things. And therefore we can understand that if an offering purifies the heart and elevates the consciousness to the degree that let's call it the contamination of material conditioning and all that goes with it, the obstacles to yoga, are removed. And one becomes more and more conscious of the omnipresence of the Supreme Person. Well, this is only going to work if the person to whom the offering is being made is a transcendental person, as opposed to an abstract idea or a fictional representation, a symbol, etc. And it is that experience of the elevation of consciousness and the purification of desires that is the actual reciprocation of love that Krishna is offering us. Because it's not as if this is happening by our effort. We're engaged in devotional practice, which is called sadhana bhakti if one is aspiring to devotional yoga. And there are instructions given to us by teachers of devotional yoga that tell us how to do this properly. But once again, we are only responsible for our commitment to the process. The results, just like everything else, are not up to us. The results come from Krishna. So that is a little bit on this first verse. And if you have any questions or comments about this idea of what is or is not on Krishna's list of offerings that he will accept, and the idea of imbuing the offering with a mood of pure devotion, or at least the attempt to make this offering in a mood of devotion, please go ahead and state your question in the form of a question in the Q&A box. Meanwhile, let's go on to the next verse. Hold on. What do you do with the offering once you have offered it? This is a very nice question. So I have a simple sacred space, an altar set up in my home. I have a very beautiful photograph, framed photograph of Radha and Krishna, specifically Radha Vrindavan Chandra, that was given to me as I was leaving a retreat in New Vrindavan with my advanced yoga teacher training group this past fall. And it was very kind of the devotees at New Vrindavan to give me this beautiful photo. And so I put it on my altar. And along with a few other different pictures of Krishna in his different forms, there's a space in front of the picture. And I have a small plate, about so big, with very simple cups, simple bowls, and a spoon. And whenever I cook, I take a little sample from the pot or pots, put it in the bowls, put some water in the cup, set the spoon up, put the plate on the altar, and I ring a bell, and I chant some mantras indicating that this is an offering. And I try my best to keep my mind focused on who I'm offering to and the mood in which I'm trying to make the offering and the mood I'm hoping to cultivate by the practice of making this offering. I wait a few minutes. Then I come back, clap my hands 3 times. I take the plate. I take the portions that are in each bowl, lift up the covers of the pots, put it back in each pot, close the covers, and then wash out the plates and bowls and cups that I use for the offering. Now, everything that I cooked is considered to be prasadam, literally meaning mercy. By offering a sample of what I have cooked, I am essentially offering the whole thing. Now, Krishna, he can consume like the whole universe. And remarkably, he doesn't actually consume the food on the plate. It's still there. Well, as I guess you knew that because your question sort of implied as much. However, Krishna still can accept the offering and imbue the food that has been offered with spiritual mojo. And you can tell by the taste and the experience of eating food that has been prepared in this consciousness of being made for the sake of an offering of love to the Supreme Person. It's just feels different. So that's what happens. Once the sample of the food has been offered, it goes back into the pots, you stir it all up. Now the whole thing's prasadam, and then you partake of what would be considered the remnants. So, does that answer your question? We have another question while I'm waiting to find out if I successfully answered the first one. So, what happens when you offer these items to Krishna, even though you can't see him directly? I do see his picture, his deity form, etc. Is my relationship partly my imagination? Good question. Are we just making this stuff up? No. And here's why. When you look at a photo of someone you love, you are seeing them. And you are meditating on them. And the feeling in your heart that is evoked by the image that you are looking at is a very real feeling. Now, here's the difference. When we look at a picture of Krishna, we're seeing Krishna, even though we may not be fully cognizant of Krishna's personal presence, just as we're not always cognizant of the most prominent of all facts, the omnipresence of the Supreme Person who is all-pervading. Our mantra in the beginning of our class indicates that the Supreme Person is all-pervading. And yet somehow or other we don't notice this, we're oblivious to this fact. But when we see a specific image of the Supreme Person, in whatever form of the Supreme Person that attracts our hearts, then we're seeing the Supreme Person in a personal way. And Krishna is seeing us. That's actually kind of the important part. It's not so important for us to see Krishna as it is for us to act in such a way that Krishna would like to see us. So being all-pervading and also omniscient, Krishna knows what is the intention here when we engage in this ritual of making an offering. Well, the intention is to engage in, to cultivate a relationship of love by making an offering. And, you know, you practice love enough and love develops. And in particular, because we're dealing with the Supreme Person and not a limited individual like you and I, the reciprocation is also not limited. There are unlimited numbers of living beings who are engaged in a devotional relationship with Krishna. And Krishna can reciprocate with all of them. All of us, I should say. So, no, it's not your imagination any more than the feeling within your heart when you look at the photograph of someone you love is your imagination. The feeling is real. The experience is real. Your love for that person is real. And while that person may be limited in so far as they will not necessarily know that you are gazing lovingly at their picture, Krishna, if we accept Krishna as a real person, as he describes himself, knows that you're looking at him, at his picture, and therefore will reciprocate in a very real way. Does that help to answer your question on that? Okay, I succeeded with the prior question, so that's very reassuring. Thank you. And hopefully I have answered satisfactorily the second question. So while I wait for my vote of confidence, let's move on to the next verse. The next two verses together, 27 and 28. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you sacrifice, whatever gifts you give, whatever austerities you perform, do them as an offering to me. For by doing so, you will be freed from the bondage of actions, reactions, both good and bad. By linking yourself to me through this principle of renunciation, you shall attain liberation and come to me. So here, not just when you're gardening or shopping for food or cooking, but in all your activities, when they're done as an offering, what Krishna is offering here is liberation, which is to say, there's no karmic reaction. This is karma-free activity. So remember earlier, especially when we were looking at the third chapter, we talked about three kinds of action. Action that produces a good reaction or a positive reaction. Action that produces a negative reaction, also known as bad karma. And action that produces no reaction whatsoever, apparently in complete violation of Newtonian physics. But because this is a transcendental spiritual science, we can jump outside the box of the laws of material nature that demand a karmic reaction for every action we take. And this is how we do it, by making everything that we do an offering. Ishvara Pranidhana in the Yoga Sutras, offering one's whole life, everything having to do with one's activities. And then no good karma, no bad karma, no karma at all. One becomes liberated from karma, and then beyond liberation, one comes to Krishna. So hanging out with Krishna in a spiritual atmosphere, Krishna's abode, is like the post-liberation activity. We hear about liberation and we wonder, okay, well, if you're liberated, then what do? Well, you hang out with Krishna. And if you are achieving your liberation by Krishna's grace in the process of bhakti yoga, that is the subject matter of this chapter. So in chapter 3, we have a couple of verses that connect to these two verses in chapter 9. And they go like this. This is the 9th verse of the 3rd chapter. Act only for the sake of offering your actions to Vishnu, free from attachment, O son of Kunti. For by such perfect action, you will be liberated from all reactions associated with your deeds. Otherwise, your actions bind you to this material world. So here we see the elliptical structure of the Bhagavad-gita. Krishna is now amplifying this idea in a slightly different context. In the 3rd chapter, he's talking about karma yoga and eventually transitions into devotion mixed with karma yoga. And here he's talking about pure devotion, unmixed, no karma yoga. The difference between karma yoga and karma yoga mixed with bhakti and pure bhakti, bhakti with no karma mixed in, is that when one rises to the level of pure bhakti or aspires to the level of pure bhakti, then one's only motivation is to please Krishna, as opposed to achieve liberation or become free from the entanglement of karma. When one's selfish motivation disappears, then that's pure bhakti. And that usually doesn't happen right away. Certainly not for me. Maybe somebody else can do that. But I've got like a billion material desires still. And the only way they are going to go away is if I continue to practice pure devotional service, which is once again called sadhana bhakti. By the practice of pure devotional service, one eventually is assured of attaining actual pure devotional service. If you practice playing the scales on a piano perfectly, well, you're not playing them perfectly, you're practicing to play them perfectly. And we can assume that eventually you will play the scales perfectly. Now, here's the thing. All the results of karma yoga are automatically achieved, included in the practice of pure devotional service. So I'm not going to worry about liberation. I'm just going to concern myself with cultivating this mood that Krishna is encouraging me to cultivate. And I will let liberation take care of itself, or I'll leave it up to Krishna as to whether or not I am liberated. Any other questions on this? While I wait for your questions or comments, I will move on. This is something that I think we can relate to that tells us something about Krishna as a person. This is text 29. I am equally disposed toward all living beings. I hate no one, nor do I favor anyone. Even so, I hold those who honor me with offerings of love within me. Indeed, I am within them as well. So, equal vision, which we also spoke about earlier, is a saintly characteristic, or you could say a godly characteristic. When the Supreme Person looks at us, that the Supreme Person doesn't see what we see, and certainly doesn't see others the way we see them. I am seeing people acting like idiots, and that annoys me. And therefore I become annoyed at them for being idiots. It's very easy to have this experience in the District of Columbia. We have something here called the DCUE, which means that people will make U-turns across 4 lanes of traffic anytime, anywhere, or in the most inconvenient place at the most inconvenient time. Why there are not more horrendous traffic accidents due to the DCUE in DC is anyone's guess. Anyway, Krishna doesn't see an idiot making a U-turn where they should not be making a U-turn. Krishna sees the pure spirit soul who is covered by the modes of material nature in such a way that they think they should make a U-turn in such a ridiculous time, place, and circumstance. However, even though Krishna says, I don't hate anybody, I don't favor anybody, I'm equal to everybody, I love everybody the same, basically, is what he's saying here. For one who approaches me with love, well, that person is special for me. And even if you are able to have that sense of being equal to all people, at least in some general sense, thinking that everyone is equal, everyone is deserving of respect, everyone is, ultimately a spiritual person, even if they don't seem very spiritual. If you're able to do that, still, we are limited to the point where we can't really reciprocate with more than a few people in our lives, a relatively small number, and in meaningful relationships of love. We just don't have the bandwidth to do that. But we certainly make exceptions for those who engage with us in a loving way. Those people hold a special place in our heart. Even though everyone is equal, those people are still special. So, similarly, Krishna also has this same sense of equal vision and making a special place in his heart for those who hold him in their hearts. Krishna encourages this kind of vision for all of us. In the 5th chapter, he says, endowed with humility and knowledge, the wise see a learned and gentle Brahmin, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and one who eats dogs with equal vision. So we are enjoined to have this same kind of equal vision, even though we are limited in our capacity to love anybody who comes toward us with an offering of love, the way Krishna can accommodate unlimited numbers of people who approach him in that way. Therefore, what Krishna is recommending for us is that we engage our capacity for love by directing it toward him. And in this way, since all beings are a part of Krishna, by directing our devotion to Krishna, this equal vision becomes possible. Question: is this kind of like the Buddhist conception of equanimity? I am not an expert in Buddhist philosophy, but I am inclined to say it is not so much like this, a Buddhist concept of equanimity, on the basis that Buddhism is a voidist philosophy. That is to say, if we are to remain equipoised ourselves, it is on account of accepting the idea that there's really no one to be riled up. The person who is not equipoised doesn't really exist, nor does the person that we see with equal vision. Because when we look at a person, then in the Buddhist conception, what you should be looking for is the emptiness that is holding the appearance of a person. That's probably as much as I can say about that. But if you would be kind enough to give me some more information about what conception of Buddhist equanimity you're talking about, I would be happy to address it. And if you were to bring that to the Facebook group so that others who are interested in what Krishna is speaking about and what Buddhism is talking about compare, I would be all the more grateful. Thank you very much for your question. All right. Let's move on to our last two verses. Verse 30, if one offers their love to me without deviation, then, even if they have engaged in dreadful behavior, they are to be considered saintly, for such a person shall be rightly absolved. Now, this is the first verse in a cluster of verses towards the end of this chapter that bring us back to Bhagavad-gita showstoppers. This sounds, on the surface, like a license for mean or deviant behavior. And the idea that even if someone does something abominable, as long as they are engaged in devotional yoga, then they should still be considered saintly and absolved of their sins. And, you know, the first thing that comes to mind are the headlines that the Catholic Church has been making as of late with their meeting about the problems of sexual predation within the church. Saintly people, presumably, engaged in very unsaintly activity for which victims and advocates for victims are demanding accountability. As well they should. It sounds in this verse as if such people should not be held accountable, that simply by their devotion or their position that offers the appearance of devotion, that God will forgive them. Sounds pretty shady. Well, that's not what that verse means. What this actually is talking about is something that we're going to talk about next week, because it's 8:59. And since there's another showstopper verse that will blow your mind and make your hair stand on end, if it were to be taken at what appears to be face value, I'm going to stop right here and continue next week and cover verses 30 and 31 and the balance of the chapter in detail. I love a cliffhanger. Don't you? Any last questions or comments before I wrap this up? While I wait for your questions and comments, I'm going to give you a quick summary of what we've spoken about this evening. Devotional service, bhakti yoga, is simple. A simple offering, a leaf, flower, fruit, or water. Doesn't have to be anything fancy, but it does have to be from within the categories that Krishna has described. If you know someone likes pizza, you offer them pizza. If you know that they need gluten-free pizza, then you order gluten-free pizza. That's what love is. The practice of love, devotional yoga, leads to purity. That is to say, you can practice pure devotional service in order to actually arrive at the platform of pure devotional service. Krishna maintains a cruelty-free diet. Good to know. If everyone were to change their diet so that we were only consuming food that we can first offer to Krishna according to his guidelines, then the whole problem of global warming would be finished. I assume you know that every study on the subject tells us that using animals for food is actually the biggest contributor to the problem of climate change. We don't call it global warming anymore because that's scary. We call it climate change. Okay, we took a look back at some of the verses in chapter 3. I also recommend going to the last verse in chapter 5 and comparing that verse to some of the verses that we spoke about this evening. We spoke about how Krishna is equal to everyone, and yet he reserves a special place in his heart for those who keep him in their hearts. And we left off with the idea that one should not find fault with an imperfect sadhu, or someone engaged in sadhana, spiritual practice. And why that is where we will pick up next week. Tonight, the simplicity of devotion, and a little bit about how Krishna sees his devotees. We covered 26 through 29, and we will pick up with 30 when we resume next time. If you have any last questions, I will be happy to take them. If you are watching this after the fact, please send me your questions, comments, complaints, Hari-kirtana.com. And I think that's all she wrote for tonight. So, showstopper alert. Next time, we will speak about people who have taken lower births. We'll also talk about the importance of punctuation. We'll review the chapter and close out with the most secret of secret secrets, this chapter being the chapter of confidential knowledge. We will look back at our different levels of secrets and secret secrets and more secret secrets and most secret secrets, and the most secret secret of all will be coming up at the end of this chapter. All right. Thank you very much for staying with me for this hour. It's always a great honor to see you all here with me, and it's always a great pleasure for me to spend this time with you. I hope I see you all again next week. And to two of you, thank you for reminding me that there's a chat box that I should look at from time to time, and not just the Q&A box. All right. I loved teaching this class, and I loved having all of you in the class. So thank you all very much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening, and a wonderful rest of your week, and a wonderful rest of your life. And I'll see you all soon.